Welcome to episode 3.5 of Kindred Sessions podcast. This is a bonus episode. We thought that in light of our last episode that it would be beneficial to take a little bit of a deeper dive into the pro-life, pro-choice conversation. If you have any comments or questions about this episode or our last episode, we'd love to hear from you. So just email us at kindredsessionspodcast@gmail.com.
And before diving in, I just want to address the stigmatism for women who have had an abortion. There are ones that I know and who I call my friends, and I have compassion now more than I ever have. I wish I could have given you a warm hug when you went through postpartum, or been there for you during hormonal chaos, or been there for you while you told your friends and your family and were met with possibly shame. And I wish I could have heard more of your story and been there for you in that. And I still am now, so if you ever want to share with me, I want to be there. And I hope this podcast is one small piece that loosens the stigma that follows you.
So to pick up on the point of episode 3 that we want to start from, we talked a little bit about what a single issue voter is. So what is a single issue voter?
It is someone who votes for a candidate based off of a single issue. So basically, you have a particular issue that is important enough to either vote solely just for the candidate, even if other pieces of the candidate don't line up, or not vote for a candidate, even if you actually agree with several things on their platform.
Right. And there are a couple single issues that have historically tended to draw predominantly white Christians into this philosophy of politics. One of which has been the legalization or delegalization of abortion. In episode 3, Christine helped us uncover that voting for a certain presidential candidate does not necessarily mean the legalization or delegalization of abortion. So we're just going to replay a short clip of what Christine said that breaks that down for us.
Whether or not Donald Trump or Joe Biden get elected, abortion will still function in this country. Because what happens functionally if, Roe versus Wade gets contended with in the Supreme Court, which for a lot of folks, is that's what everybody is kind of waiting for, and everyone has their eye upon to see, if Roe versus Wade is going to be contended with in the Supreme Court and if it's going to get overturned. Roe v. Wade is the legal precedent through which, federally speaking, abortion is legal. If that decision gets overturned, what then happens is states decide what laws they are going to put in place in regard to abortion. You're going to have some states that are more strict on their abortion laws. You're going to have other states that are less strict on their abortion laws. Abortion itself is not going away. It's more of an access issue. And it's more of a states' rights issue. As to whether or not Roe is in place. What Roe does is it codifies the federal protection of the right to access abortion services nationwide. But abortion itself is not going away. So what I would say is that when you're at the ballot box, and conversely, I should say on the flip side, if Biden is elected president, there are still states that are passing laws that are refining a particular state's approach to the issue of abortion, good, bad, or indifferent. There are states that are passing laws and have passed laws that are on the books that prohibit abortion in certain cases and put prohibitions around access to abortion. And of course, a lot of those laws get contended in the courts, and there's an appeals process, and it's long and it's arduous. But the reality is, in either of those scenarios, abortion still exists. And so to me, it's not about voting for one candidate or the other who says they're going to overturn or uphold Roe v. Wade. My question then is, who has policies that are going to provide the most human dignity to everyone involved in that ecosystem? Who has the policies that are going to dignify an unborn baby? Who has policies that are going to dignify a mother or a father who are wrestling with the decision over whether or not to have an abortion? Who's going to pass policies that are going to change the structure of our social services in order to make motherhood and fatherhood less daunting economically?
So this is a good time to differentiate between pro-abortion and pro-choice. No matter where you lie on the spectrum of pro-choice or pro-life, you're probably not pro-abortion. Let's keep that in mind. Nobody wants people to be in the position where they need an abortion. No one's excited about unborn babies dying. Both sides have the goal of eliminating the need for abortion. They have the same truth that abortion is not the goal in more ways than one, but our primarily two-party system has different ways of approaching that truth. Different nuances are emphasized, and to the pro-lifers, I would say focusing on the pro-choicers as the enemy is probably not helpful, and vice versa. There are probably few other areas that we would say choice is the enemy or that life is the enemy, I think sometimes focusing on the enemy distracts us from the power that is found in bringing different perspectives together to accomplish a shared goal. And could you imagine if these sides worked together to create reform that supported the root of the issue versus the symptom? The symptom being having an abortion, the issues, the root of the issues, well, there are so many, there's a whole lot of roots, actually more than we could list, because everyone has their own unique set of circumstances. And who am I to oversimplify that?
Right, so we wanted to just take an opportunity to share the story of a couple that we know with their own set of unique circumstances. So this next segment is going to be an interview that I conducted with some friends of ours who have had to navigate the reality of abortion. Most of this next segment is just them sharing their story, but we thought that it'd be helpful to put things into perspective. Abortion is not simply an issue. Pro-life and pro-choice are not simply positions. When you're going through the throes of it, it becomes clear that it's not that simple. So our hope is that by listening to the Lasters' story, that you can not only put yourself in their shoes, but that you could see this with fresh eyes. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Eric and Erin Laster.
We have always been before kids, on the stance of pro-life because we were infertile, or so we thought. Different podcast. But and so for us, it was very hard to get pregnant. So it was hard to imagine that if somebody got pregnant, that they would want to end that pregnancy. And so we did IVF, and we were blessed with our firstborn, who came out just fine, for more or less. And when we got pregnant,
Hudson, if you're listening to this as an adult, we love you, and you're a brilliant child.
And then we got pregnant with our second one, same way, IVF. It was the same exact road we went down from before with Hudson. We had gone in for an ultrasound just to check to make sure everything was okay. And lo and behold, there was a couple of really big markers and for indications of a severe chromosome defect. And the lady at the time had said that it was most likely trisomy 13 or 18, which is incompatible with life. And
what does that mean?
That just means that when the baby's born with that condition, he or she is not likely to make it to term. And if they do make it to term, then they usually don't live for many minutes after that, from what I know of.
Wow.
Yeah. So in the office with the doctor who's telling us all these things after we had just gone through IVF had said, termination is most likely what people would do at this point in your road. And then we're thinking to ourselves, well, that's not an option. We've always been told and thought to ourselves, like, abortion's off the table no matter what. And we tried really hard for this baby. So that definitely sent us home with this, like, weird realization that, like, we've now actually encountered, like, a real reason why somebody might seek termination or abortion of a pregnancy.
it's kind of a whirlwind. We went up to my parents' house after that, and I just remember thinking to myself, what am I going to do if I have to do this? And I kind of had this kind of saying, like, I won't let my wife deliver a dead baby because there's no honor in that. And at the time, so I was in 2015, I was in the process of becoming a pastor at a church we were formerly at. And that it seems like abortion and being a pastor are in such different universes.
Yeah.
And we were confronted with it in just a very real reality.
What did it feel like in that moment when the doctor's like, this is the best way forward?
Well, I don't necessarily think she said this was the best way forward. So I don't want to throw this particular doctor under the bus by any means. She said most people in our situation would go and terminate. She did say, we would like to do more tests before you make a decision. But the likelihood of there being something wrong is very high. And she gave us like the statistics being that it was a less than 1% chance that he would come out with normal chromosomes. So, we obviously hadn't, at that point, I think Eric and I both decided Eric more carrying me through each day, like, we're just going to tackle this day. And we're going to figure out what's going on with this day. And so if that was getting a test to try to get some answers, to try to move forward, then, we would, I think it came down to like, we didn't want to have to make that decision, but we know that could be a possibility based on any of the information the tests were going to give us.
Yes.
Nonetheless, the first test was like a week later, and then we had to wait an excruciating 4 days for the initial results, which were going to tell us if it was a trisomy 18 or 13 or 21 or Turner syndrome. And then she did say it wouldn't be Turner syndrome because it was a boy. So we were waiting for those first ones, specifically 13 and 18. I knew I did not want to carry a baby that was going to, I didn't want to. I mean, I
Two tests? Three tests.
And we looked down to the tiny little, like, I don't even know, the strands on the chromosomes. It's called a microarray. And nothing ever came back with anything definitive. So fortunately, we weren't put in a position to make a decision that.
So every time some result came back, it was kind of like, well, we just need to wait longer, basically.
And then, what Aaron was saying is the likelihood of Nolan being born with nothing wrong was
less
between
than 1%.
Less than 1%.
Wow.
Yeah, so we knew we were dealing with something. And obviously, like, nobody ever wants, like, at what point do you say, okay, well, this is a life worth living, but this isn't? Like,
right.
That's not our decision to make.
Right.
So it's no decision that any parent or person should ever have to go through. I think we were just praying that it would be, if it were something that we found, that it would be something that he would at least have a shot at life, not just come out and die. So.
What you said there, it's like, it's not a decision that any person should have to make.
Yeah.
No.
But it is a decision that you guys had to make.
I don't know if it was like my own perception of how the Christian community views abortion, but I was ashamed to tell my fellow Christians that what I was facing, these situations. It really opened my eyes not just to this issue, but a lot of seemingly black and white Christian issues. I think God, through this, has kind of allowed me to look through like a lens of like a 4-dimensional kaleidoscope. And it's changed my heart about how, I really just had to like look at the world.
you don't know until you're in a situation where something like this is, you're directly faced with it. So like we can say all day long, oh, if that were me, I would do it this way. I was that person.
Right.
And then you're in the situation and you're like, oh, I don't know what I would do. And somebody else doesn't have the right to like pass judgment on what I would or wouldn't do because they're not in my shoes. Eric carried me through that. I couldn't get out of bed.
Wow.
I wouldn't talk to anyone. I wouldn't look at anything on the internet except for anything that had to do with these findings, which was a bunch of fluid all around his body. He was surrounded by this big bubble of fluid. So I'd only read about that. I'd read all these research studies, and they were just awful, awful numbers. They called it normal in the studies, meaning the child had no like any sort of birth defect or syndromes or anything. And so I would just read the studies over and over, the same ones.
Just kind of hoping for something new to jump out, or?
I don't even know. I really had no hope. I had zero hope.
Was saying the same prayer. My prayer was that, God, please take this from my hands and don't make me have to make a decision.
And every single day, Eric says, we are not killing our baby. Every single day, he would tell me that. We do not have any answers. And I was just, I'm the pessimist in our relationship. Everybody knows that. Or I like to call myself the realist. But he said, until we have any answers, we're not doing anything. So you just have to, just be patient. And that's just not something I like. I don't like to feel out of control of situations. And so, there's a certain part of me that I don't know how far I would have actually gotten had Eric said like, yeah, let's, go ahead and terminate. But that was just something that was constantly going through my head because I was so scared.
What were you afraid of?
Having a dead baby. Or a baby that was significantly impacted.
Yeah. It's just so crazy thinking about, that was a long time to get through. It wasn't like we were 10 weeks away from the full term. It was majority of the pregnancy. And it's even like hard for me to describe like how we even survived that summer of 2015. I just remember thinking a lot about Jesus calming the seas. And I kind of held on to that and would repeat that story over to Aaron. And I don't know why I felt like everything was okay. I just stuck to like that one glimmer of hope that like we didn't have any firm evidence at all.
So in lack of firm evidence, you were choosing to be
Yes, but
to go with the less than 1%.
But in the same time, every time the test results would come back negative, not like negative feeling, but negative that nothing was there. It didn't like take away the percentage. It didn't add to the percentage of hope. The hope really didn't, and especially for Aaron, I can remember that. Like, yeah, you cleared 80% of this, but then your brain's gonna go, oh, what about the 20%?
Sure.
And so there were better days and bad days, but that whole summer was just surviving to day to day and supporting Aaron.
Yeah. Wow.
And I think a big one for us is when we kind of cleared the 26, 28 week, when abortion got definitely pulled off the table. There was a little bit of sense of emotional rest, essentially, because we felt like there wasn't a big decision to be made.
So you're saying, like, legally speaking, you can't terminate after that point in the pregnancy.
After 24 weeks. Yeah.
Well, and the doctors definitely made that very clear every appointment we went to. Well, you have until 27 weeks or 26 weeks. I don't remember. It was one of those. And even when we had said, like, well, we don't have any thing that's telling us that this baby's not thriving, so we're going to keep going. We would still, depending on which doctor we saw, would Eric said that I read between the lines a little too much with them, and I would just, pull out anything negative that they said and said, see, they think this baby is doomed too. That's definitely how I felt until we got to that 27-week mark, and then we changed doctors, and we had the most amazing high-risk doctor on the face of the planet. And he specialized in genetic. He claimed that he was the only geneticist in Northern Nevada, and he really helped us get through the rest of that pregnancy. Yeah. So after the final, well, there was never any final ultrasounds. We had ultrasounds every week up until the last week that I was pregnant. I was 37 weeks. And one of the other complications that had happened to me that was totally different from all the initial stuff was that I had way too much amniotic fluid. So way too much. And they're also saying that could be indicative of all these other concerns like swallowing problems, or I'm not really even sure. There were other things. So they wanted to have a NICU team ready because of that, and because they still didn't know what was wrong with the baby, but there must be something wrong with the baby. So my water broke on accident at 37 weeks in the middle of the night.
Wow.
And we were terrified, but we were so relieved to just be done with the pregnancy, no matter the outcome. I didn't have to not know anymore. I was finally going to get some answers, maybe not. So we delivered him, and he came out. I don't know how to really explain it. He seemed fine in the beginning, but then after he needed oxygen right away. And they called him floppy. They said he was a floppy baby. And that is also an indicator of some sort of rare genetic syndrome. So we're thinking, okay, this must be the Noonan syndrome or something that we didn't test for of all the things that we had tested for. And the nurses said things, and some, all the people that had looked at him and seen him, and they wanted another chromosome test. And then our doctor had to say he had already had all these tests. So it was really nerve-wracking. I thought I was going to get some relief when he came out, and it wasn't that relieving. And our pediatrician was out of town at the time. And so the on-call pediatrician came in and said, you guys, it doesn't look very good right now. He's not doing great. He needs to be on oxygen. We need him to kind of wake up a little bit. I'll keep you guys updated on how it goes. So I was so tired and exhausted. It was the middle of the night, and it was my second C-section in my life, and I was just over the whole pregnancy. So I went to sleep, and we woke up the next day, and the same pediatrician came in and said, I don't know what happened to him, but he's a totally different baby today. He's moving better. He's breathing better. I'm going to let you guys go home today. And it was like, finally, I had felt this relief. I don't need medical intervention anymore. I don't need all these doctors looking over me all the time, wondering what's wrong with this baby. They're going to let us go home. He must be fine. So we took him home, and I watched him like a hawk every day of his life until I think it was about when he started talking at a very early 18 months when I started thinking, okay, I think he's going to be fine. Wow. And he is 5 now, and he's smart and funny and emotional and all the things that a quote unquote normal 5-year-old would be like. And while I wonder, would he have been considered the normal outcome that all these studies say? I don't know. He still could have some rare he could still have Noonan syndrome that we've never tested for. Heck, Eric could have Noonan syndrome for all we know. So that's still a possibility. But the reality is that he, obviously it's not something that's impacting his life in a negative way. So
think about how many moms and dads are in the position where that they are the 99 point whatever %, It's a lot of people probably. you know, and and I think especially when we're talking about you know, these really hot button issues, in particularly, obviously, we're talking about abortion, but there's just when you put a story to it and a person's actual experience, that's when things get real, you know. And no one says it outright. No one says like, this is it and this isn't it. And if you do anything other than these two things, then you're going to be in trouble, you know, but you feel it. And I think that's probably not exclusive to pastoral ministry. I think that's kind of in the air, you know, depending on where you fall, where, you know, what side of the paradigm you fall on. There's some expectation. It is no longer, you can't even have that conversation where you're trying to like hypothesize about like, well, in this situation and in this situation and in that circumstance and in this circumstance, like it's just no longer a cognitive exercise.
Exactly.
It's just beyond, it's completely surpassed that.
As you were talking, I was thinking that, and you said cognitive, I was thinking it's when a cognitive idea becomes an emotional reality.
Yeah.
Is when you have to shift.
Mm-hmm.
And you're forced to shift. And like Aaron and I have said, is we don't wish this situation on anybody,
Right.
or anyone to be put in it. But unfortunately, people are.
Yes.
And that doesn't mean that people who are put in it and they have to make a really tough decision are evil or wanted to
Yeah.
and won't be affected for their lives. It's just so much more than a narrow-minded thought that people could just use abortion for birth control.
Yeah, I think that this whole situation gave me the perspective of, with something as sensitive as abortion, I just don't feel like anybody has the right to say whether it's right or wrong or what they would do in whatever situation brings about that potential decision. Because at the end of the day, like, before this happened to us, I was very much in the camp of like, I just don't understand. I don't get it. And being in it, like, really helped me see, like,
the kinds of things that you have to think about when you're in this position are not things you're prepared to think about ever. Nothing prepares you for that.
Right.
And like, how are you going to judge somebody, you know, and how they make sense of it? So, well, two questions. One, how many people really knew what was going on? And two, when people were kind of responding to you, did you feel like you could kind of spot it right away? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I definitely had two camps of friends. Like, I had friends that were like, what are you doing carrying this pregnancy? Like, what are you doing? And I had friends that were like, you would never terminate, would you? Like, it was on both sides. And I was like, I don't know. Like, what do I do? It's just, it was hard for me. And obviously all those people cared about me. It was hard for me to like wrap my head around that people felt so strongly about something that wasn't even affecting them personally.
Yeah. Wow. I think that's profound, is like how strongly people can feel about this when it's not their world. Mm-hmm. That's a significant thing to notice, I think.
Yeah. And to their benefit, I think that they were trying to care the best they could, but we also kind of saw just how big of a hot button topic even the word abortion is.
Sure.
Especially in Christian circles.
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, it's like unspoken, because it's like, oh, well, that's evil. That's up there with Hitler, and it should never be considered in any way, shape, or form. And unfortunately, some of our Christian friends were the ones that we felt kind of the judge the most of, but I also feel like they were just caring for us like the best way they knew how.
Sure.
Because you care for people like with what you experience in life.
Mm-hmm.
And when you kind of tell our story, it's heavy and people sometimes don't know how to respond.
Yeah.
I mean, I got love for all of our friends, just a hard time for everybody. But I think what I emotionally took from it was just like what Aaron was saying, like, there's always way more of the story. It's not black and white.
Specifically with like my really close friends, like we talked about it because I brought it up and I was scared and I didn't, I was looking for where people landed on this because I knew, like, in the back of my head, it's that unspoken Christian rule, like, we don't talk about abortion, like that's not on the table. But then I also wanted to see where, like, what do I do if that's not an option?
Sure.
I think I remember some times where people like wouldn't celebrate like being pregnant. They were getting pregnant at the same time. They would withhold that from us. And at times it kind of felt like we were like a pariah. Like people didn't want to enter in like to difficult conversations or be around us because it was uncomfortable for them.
Sure.
So if I were to give advice for someone who's going through this as friend, it's to offer sympathy, but not empathy. You don't need to feel sorry for them. You just need to support them.
Mm-hmm.
And support can look different than having to give an opinion.
Yeah. Well, so what does it look like then? Because the reason I ask that is because I think that that it's kind of what you guys were talking about. It's when you're in a position that's really uncomfortable, like you kind of default to some of those mechanisms that are like, this is why I think the way that I do, and what, like I've seen it come out in myself, but just in other people as well. Just like when you're put in a position, all of a sudden this thing that you have ascribed to is being like put in your world, and all of a sudden you have to actually like act on it. You say things and do things that you might not have done if you got another shot, So like, what does it look like for someone to support without necessarily giving their opinion?
Well, I'm like a big person who likes to research everything. Like, look at the circumstances with what the person's going through. Let them be the one to talk to you, not the other way around. I think the biggest thing that people can get a lot better on is listening and not wanting to fix something. In a world of, I mean, it's funny that we're doing a podcast because we're the ones talking. But if you look at the world of social media, Instagram, it's always like a forward, like you're putting something forward versus receiving something.
Sure.
And I think when it comes to someone in this type of situation where you don't have the words, it's perfectly okay not to have the words.
What do you have then?
I'm a big proponent of just being with people, being a constant, I guess, in people's lives. I think that goes a huge way. I know during that time, both Aaron and I have really amazing parents, and we never felt judged at all because all they did was really listen.
What do you think, Aaron?
I definitely had one specific friend who checked in on me, I think, almost every day. And at the time it was, I'm the same. I'm not getting out of bed, but I think that was really important. When you're going through something that's really hard, the people in your life may not know how to respond to it. One, also have their own lives going on around them. And it's kind of like, a family member, somebody dies in your life. Well, everybody gives you sympathy, or empathy, or one of them right away. But then a few weeks pass and months pass, and it's like, that's old news and nobody even really checks in in that way. And it could have been very much like that in my pregnancy. Like, oh, you got all these like tests back and everything's good. Like, okay, we're moving on to the next problem. But I think that definitely, like, I had someone checking in on me every day or every so often, like, you hanging in there, and like,
that was helpful.
Open to listen, but didn't necessarily have to. And that's helpful.
Your guys' perspective on this is, it's obviously particular to you guys, but I'm just thinking of the people out there who know people in these positions, whether or not it's something like abortion or just like something really hard they're going through. and not really knowing how to be a support, without like trying to make someone feel better or trying to like explain why they should feel better or something like that. But
I think that's a human mystery, because everybody wants different support and everybody wants to be cared for in a different way. Eric and I are completely different in that way, like everybody has a different way that they care for people and a different way that they want to be cared for. Sure. And then we all mesh together. So it's just this giant mystery, and we're all just trying to navigate it as well as we can.
Right.
Thank you so much to the Lasters for your vulnerability. And I hope that before anyone starts jumping to political conclusions after their story, that we would all just stop and appreciate their experience. For some, this testimony could be fuel for either side of the spectrum, but we hope that it brings both sides together in one small way to unify them in compassion for the people who have been at a crossroads such as this.
So again, as always, if you have any questions or comments that you'd like to share with us, we'd love to hear from you. So please just send us an email at kindredsessionspodcast@gmail.com. Thanks. See you next time.